this whole thing. I did not make the draft order. I used a randomizer 3 times, and if I would have ended up with the first pick, I never would have heard the end of it. I would have never heard the end of it.
As the person who was making the randomizer, it would have seemed pretty suspect.
I did the 3 randoms, and on the third one, yes, Cody ended up with the first pick in the draft tonight, which is just ridiculous. Honestly.
Why is that ridiculous?
Congrats on having
Tyreek Hill or
Christian McCaffrey.
I should be allowed to have the number 1 pick every once in a while.
That's not how it works. You could get last pick every year for 20 years. There's nothing to prevent that from happening.
How many times have you had the number 1 pick in a fantasy football draft? Like maybe
twice,
once?
Maybe,
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever had it. I've had 2 before. I don't know if I'd want the number 1 pick, though, because... hang on.
You're guaranteed either
that's
Lamb, Hill, or McCaffrey.
I would rather have like 4 or 5 or 6, I think, than number 1.
Well, anyway, real quick, for the 18 of you, real quick, Cody has the first pick, Real McCoy second, Burrow's best, which is Drew third. Deshaun
So Drew's third?
Yeah. Deshaun discharges for Twitch Squad 5, West Cannon Coyotes 6, Rolling with the Homies 7,
reference.
Copper Pig KC 8th, I'm 9th, Gum Bucket Gridiron is 10, 11 is Silly Little Freaks. That one's cut off. Number 12, Spanky something. Number 13, Meat Beater. 14 is Ridge Chips. 15, somewhere over Dwayne Bow. 18, Tomahawk Tua. 17, it's cut off. Get your Butker in the kitchen. And then Bob and Weave. Those are the fantasy teams from our listeners.
Looking forward to it. You had mentioned the division, though, the AFC West. I think we've all pretty much declared it over because we all think that they play in a bad division. They are the best team, and there are a lot of question marks. But I got asked on a radio interview, and I think it's fair. I got asked, okay, but what are the circumstances in which any of these teams would compete with the Chiefs? So I started kicking it around. I think for the Raiders, it's fairly simple. The Raiders actually have a lot of offensive weapons. They have, some young, talented running backs. They have, like good wide receiver. If Gardner Minshew has his Baker Mayfield year, they could get within 3 games. Okay, that's as close as the Raiders can get. We can bury them pretty quick.
Baker Mayfield year was in a crappy NFC South where the winner tied with 9 wins.
Correct. That's why I said they can only get within 3. That's the best case scenario for the Raiders. They finished 3 games away from the division. The Chargers is easy, right? That Quentin Johnson is actually a lot better in year 2. Ladd McConkey is the truth. And Justin Herbert's plantar fascia doesn't bother him the entire time. And then, I don't know, I guess the defense is better than I was expecting. It takes a bit of a stretch, but Justin Herbert is a good enough quarterback that if there was one team I would entertain this year, it is still them.
I guess. I mean, I just think that roster is super thin. They needed to gut it, and they did. They got some of the older players out of there. This is a rebuild year, in my opinion, for Harbaugh. Next year, then I think the Chargers become a threat again. I don't think they're a threat at all this year. You're saying, what does it look like? Yeah, my issue is, I just don't believe, Ladd McConkey could be hurt throughout the season himself. Herbert, who knows, with the plantar fascia. And then Quentin Johnston, who I was really high on a year ago. We'll see what he is in year 2. This may surprise you. You can do exact division order standings in order of finish. You can do that FanDuel or whatever.
And how would you do it?
The Chiefs won, but it would, if you're, I don't know what the odds are to get some more money. It would not surprise me if the Chargers are actually the team, Cody, that ended up finishing in last place in the AFC West.
Wow, you think that?
I'm serious.
A comedy thing.
Because if Herbert doesn't play very much this season because of the injury, Gardner Minshew's capable of winning random games he has no business winning. And I told you, I think the Raiders
made a nice career of it.
I think the Raiders are winning against the Chargers in Week 1 as well. If you're just from a value and odds perspective, I could see order of finish we get Chiefs 1. Pick the Broncos 2 or Raiders 3 and Chargers finish dead last in this division.
If Herbert's healthy, though, do you think the Chargers
If Herbert's healthy, they don't finish dead last, but it'll be close.
Okay.
But here's the thing. The gap between last and second, it might be 6 wins to 8 wins. I don't think anybody else in the AFC West is getting to 9 wins. I think 8 wins is the peak after Kansas City. I think the Broncos and Raiders both could be an 8-win, 7-win
So the
team.
truth is, you don't think that there's a scenario barring Mahomes going down.
Correct.
It would have to be something Chiefs related in order for one of these teams to compete in the division.
You just went through it.
I just think it's a stretch. I think it'd be Bo Nix would have to end up being C.J. Stroud. Okay, and then in that scenario, their defense probably still isn't good enough. But still.
And they don't have the weapons that Houston has either.
No. He'd be throwing it to Cortland Sutton and then a bag of rocks.
And so the Texans did not have a team like the Chiefs in their division last year. That's the other problem. You know,
they had a bunch
Trevor
of
Lawrence and the
mediocre teams.
Jags were disappointing. The Colts, Anthony Richardson got hurt. The Titans stunk. Like,
is there any other division in football that you feel this way, where there's just no hypothetical in which you can
probably not. Honestly.
Just be like, there's no, because like I could see a way in which the 49ers fall short.
Correct.
Because there's other good teams in the division. The Rams get the division. Dolphins, Bills. We know that one's open. We know that the South is open.
The Chiefs are in the easiest division in football.
Yeah.
And they're a big reason why. Like, they're making it easy because they've been so dominant, right? Let me be clear on that. Like, the Chiefs have to factor into this equation, too. It's not just that these other teams are disappointing, but the Chiefs have made it feel this way. They have won it, 8 years? Are we up to 8 now?
Yeah.
8 years in a row. I mean, that is not just the division not being good. It is also your own dominance. The same way we talked about the Patriots in the AFC East. Yeah, their division stunk for a bulk of it, the quarterbacks that were in it, but Tom Brady and the Patriots were also that damn good.
Yeah, they kept you underneath them. But they never. Justin Herbert's the best quarterback that they ever had in the division with Tom Brady until Josh Allen eventually was there.
Sure.
Like, I mean, there wasn't a quarterback.
It was Mark Sanchez, really.
They were going Mark Sanchez
game.
and Jay Fiedler and Chad Pennington all those years. They weren't going up against any kind of realistic.
Cleo Lemon and whatever his name was.
Cleo Lemon, he was in Miami briefly. It was a pretty bleak turn of quarterbacks. And J.P. Lossman and Tyrod Taylor and a million others that filtered through those organizations against him. But that's what it looks like.
One of the best backup quarterbacks ever, Tyrod
That's
Taylor.
what it looks like in the AFC West right now. Right now, it is Bo Nix, a 29-year-old rookie quarterback.
Oh my gosh.
29. Okay. He's not okay.
Come on, Minshew.
Jeez.
Oh, my goodness.
How old is he really? 24?
He's 24. He turns 25 in February.
If he gets to the Super Bowl, he'll.
That's not happening either.
There's a bit of an age discrepancy between the two.
How old is Gardner Minshew? Like 20, 28, 29?
He's in his 20s still?
I think so.
No.
He just looks older.
Yeah. I think
He's 28.
Yeah.
He's in his 20s still?
He's as old as I am.
He just looks older.
Yeah, you guys look like you grew up in different generations. Not just like you guys are the same age. They legitimately, Drew and Gardner Minshew look like they're 10 years apart.
I mean, we've said this. Drew could pass for like a 19, 20-year-old if he had to. Like, if he was wearing the right clothes and he was in the right setting, you'd be like, oh, he kind of still fits. Gardner Minshew, it's the facial hair, the mustache.
I think maybe we were talking about division. If there's any other division like it, maybe the NFC South, where Atlanta's just so good, or is too good now. I know that it's the Falcons, but just collectively getting Kirk Cousins and the group that they have, there's nobody that's beating them. I mean, the Saints aren't good enough. The Buccaneers aren't.
But the AFC West and then NFC South are the two worst divisions in football. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Someone says Minshew's been 35 his whole professional life.
Just like he's permanently 35. It's like the opposite of the Paul Rudd thing. He doesn't age. He aged to 35, but maybe he'll just stay there forever? I'm stunned. Stunned. He's only 28 years old. He also feels like he's just been in the league longer than that.
There's guys who are that age that still play in college, actually.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. JJ Picollo had something really interesting to say about Daniel Lynch. You asked him about Daniel Lynch, and did we finally find the role? 2 2/3 yesterday, shutout innings, saved the bullpen some innings, didn't let the game ever get close enough that you had to use Bubich or had to use Urseg. You didn't need anybody good out of your bullpen. Lynch ate up those innings. When you ask him about it, he's like, that was maybe the most encouraging thing out of all of it yesterday. You could hear it in JJ Picollo's voice when he joined the show about an hour ago, how excited he was about the possibility with Lynch. This just has me thinking, like, what took so long? For weeks, I have thought it is enough time with it, and you got to start looking in AAA to just find out if they can get an out instead of the guys who are actively doing it. I think Josh Vernier was right yesterday on his pregame show. He suggested that Will Smith probably has this injury that he's going on the IL for, and it probably is something that has bothered him for a long time. But he finally swallowed some pride and said, I'm not getting anybody out. I got to make some room on this roster, at least for a little bit. Well, they might cut me.
Yeah,
I might not be on this roster because if I don't go on the IL, where am I going to go? Daniel Lynch was one of the most encouraging things out of that entire game yesterday. And I know I'm a Daniel Lynch believer, or was. I have this year told you I had stopped counting on that. What he did yesterday gives me some hope that there's a role in the bullpen.
No, it was great to see. It definitely was. And, I think the next question, of course, like anything, is because of prior track record. All right, what's the next appearance look like?
Sure.
That's the next step for him, is putting together back-to-back outings. But this year, knowing all the bullpen issues that the Royals have had, outside of Lucas Urseg, basically, and occasionally a little stretch of another player or two, There's nobody else that they've been able to fully rely on. If he's another guy you can throw in the mix, and especially if you think, and look,
He's a multi-inning guy.
We're a month away from having to worry about playoff rosters and how many pitchers and all this kind of stuff, but ultimately, who can help you? Who do they trust at that given time? And
he has a chance to
Daniel
earn that
Lynch
month.
over the next month has a chance to prove that he's someone that they can trust and can be valuable. That's the opportunity he has to contribute to this year's team. If he wants to stay in the big leagues, that's where it's going to have to be right now for this team. And I think ultimately it may end up being, a great thing for his career. I understand.
Worked out for Wade Davis and others.
When you were drafted and starting pitching, and he started for this team this year, we all know that. But that could end up being something that's actually really good for his career if he can find a role here than the final 30-plus days of the regular season.
Part of it is like, I'm ready for Jonathan Bolin instead of Chris Stratton. All I'm saying is cut the weight who hasn't gotten an out in 2 months. Like, there's a couple of guys in this bullpen, Gold, that have not gotten a productive out in weeks for this roster. And if there's other guys, I don't care if it's Champlain or if it's Jonathan Bolin, and maybe you want to wait a week on Christian, or wait a year on Christian Champlain, that's fine. But, there are other guys in here that I was never counting on Daniel Lynch helping this team. But I'd gotten to the point of I was ready to see some of these other guys, including him, because the rest of the bullpen was struggling so much, I didn't feel like it was going to get worse. It seemed unlikely it could get worse. He was like, MJ, he's been doing some stuff where like he just shows up in a hero moment a couple times a year for this team. It's great. Bobby, Salvi, things we know. Cole, things we know. Daniel Lynch was all right, he didn't make the starting rotation. They gave him a little taste of it early in the season. It went horribly. They just punted him down to AAA, where he was a full-time starter and a really effective one. And you're like, okay. But they've never actively tried him in the bullpen. Not like Chris Bubich, where to protect his innings, he was just a starter. And then they put him in the bullpen, and instead of throwing 91, which he was doing the last time he was in the bigs, he was throwing 94, 95 from the left side. And with that height, like it is not a stretch to be like, well, that works better. And they're only going to see him for 6 outs, 9 outs? Well, now it really works. He doesn't have to see anyone the second or third time through, right? No? Okay. The one thing they've never had in their bullpen this entire year is a long reliever. Like, not just an innings eating, screw everything up. Like, for when Cole Reagans was going to be in trouble last night, and he was going to be out in the 5th inning because of pitch count. Sometimes you need somebody to cover 2 or 3 innings before you get to Urseg.
In fairness,
maybe he can be that.
And in fairness, though, they haven't utilized that partially because, Seth Lugo is going to finish with the most innings pitched in the big leagues this year, and Cole Reagans is, trending. So some of it has been the starting pitching was so good they were getting long, extended quality starts. And at one point, very early in the season, before he ultimately was placed on, non-baseball or injury list or whatever, Jordan Lyles, and then ultimately cut from the team a month or whatever ago. Like he was going to be their long basically wash-up duty at that point, right?
Yes. But, I mean, Lynch you could use...
Mop-up duty, yeah.
Look, I'm not calling him this, so I guess just relax a little bit. But if it works, you can use him more in the, Andrew Miller role, where it's the 4th, you don't want to expose Michael Lorenzen in a September 10th game to the 3rd time through the order. He's given up a run. Why can't he go 2 to get you to the bullpen? Why can't the combination of him and Marsh get you somewhere, or him and Lorenzen, or let's say you are trying to cut down on Lugo's... he gets his pitch count up a little bit in a game. Why can't Lynch come in twice a week as a bridge guy and help smooth those things over? One game, I'm not saying it has to be that way.
He might be able, but let's see what happens.
That was one of the most encouraging things I've seen out of Daniel Lynch in a long time.
No question. Let's see what the next appearance looks like for him, if he can put back-to-back outings together. Someone was asking on the Jay Southland Toser's text line here on 96.5 The Fan, 913-586-7965. Hey, what's the story with Reagans? Well, we got good news after the game yesterday, but also you heard from JJ Picollo earlier. We asked him about, hey, was it really just cramps? And he's like, yeah, he was dealing with cramps, hot weather, humidity in Cleveland before the game even started and throughout. So, of course, immediately you see Salvi point, and you're like, oh, boy, you're thinking.
I was scared.
You're thinking elbow, arm, and then when you found out it wasn't elbow, arm, you're like, okay, that's better. But then you still hear cramp. You're worried that, oh, man, was it actually a hamstring?
He's going to start.
No, he's just cramping. He's going to be fine.
JJ said it pretty much was happening the entire game, and then eventually couldn't get rid of it.
Basically, was like, yeah, he's going to have to hydrate better.
Also, that explains this start. It can't explain the previous one, but this one, you're like, hey, he's got no control. He's like, okay, so he just had cramps the entire. I mean, that would probably.
If that's based off of what we were told, that's what it sounds like. Also, might have impacted yesterday's performance for sure.
There's no reason at this point, I think, to like cover for Cole Reagans. I think you would do that for a pitcher who is struggling or has struggled the entire season. That's not been Cole Reagans. He's been excellent this entire season. You don't have to cover for him because he had one start in which he didn't have command. I think he had cramp-related issues in the game, couldn't shake him, got him out of the game early, and ideally he'll be back 4 days from now.
Trash of the day.
All right, which direction do you want me to head for trash of the day? I'll give you a brief.
Ooh, choices.
One has to do with a helicopter and a missing child.
Oh, that's a good start.
The other one has to do with a bald eagle. Or a bird, I'm sorry.
I think I know where you're going with the bird, but let's do the bird. For me, I'll vote bird.
My vote would be for the baby in the helicopter.
Flip a coin then.
All right, let's go with the... We'll end up doing these later in the week.
You
So
get the final vote. There's three of us.
I'll go with the child and the
Okay.
helicopter. So, in New York, a TV news... And then the reporter on the rooftop of his building